How you doing, y'all? This is MCM, and you're listening to You Probably Right podcast. This is episode 362, one dear to my heart. I spent a lot of time on it. I think you're going to get the benefits. If you're anything like me and like the people that I am describing, the situations I'm describing, then I think this will be very, very beneficial for you. Okay, so remember, this episode, like all the other episodes, are for entertainment purposes only. If you get something out of it beyond that, then hooray. Here we go. Why do I stop being myself when I'm afraid of losing someone? Okay, ready? So let me start with the actual question. Why do some of us stop being ourselves once we finally get something or somebody we're afraid to lose? Because if you think about it, right, that doesn't make sense. You were yourself when the person noticed you, right? You were yourself when you made them laugh. You were yourself when you looked and took the chance. You were yourself when you said something a little bit different, took a shot you normally wouldn't take, or walked in a situation thinking, you know what? Nothing tried, nothing done. And then it works. What? Somebody likes you or is into you. I say like's probably an old an old phrase, but I'm an old guy, so whatever. You see, you get the opportunity, you get invited into the room, you get the position, you get the attention, you score, for lack of a better word. And now, all of a sudden, the same person who had enough creativity, confidence, and nerve to get there starts getting careful. You start watching what you say. You park the bus. You stop taking chances. You stop being funny. You stop asking direct questions. You stop telling the person when something bothers you. You start hiding what things are costing you. In your head, right? You're thinking, you're protecting what you've gained, that old Rocky phrase. I don't want to lose what I got. But the strange part is, right? Sometimes the things you're doing to stop yourself from losing is exactly the things that cause you to actually lose. Does it make sense? Not necessarily because you get rejected right away. Sometimes you stay. Sometimes the relationship stays. Sometimes the job stays. Sometimes the person continues dealing with you. But you become smaller inside the situation. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, did I keep it or did I lose myself trying to keep it? That's what I want to talk about. Because I think a lot of tender-hearted people do this. That's right, tender-hearted people. I'm not talking about someone who's trying to dominate the room, conquer the world, or become some alpha master of the universe. I'm talking about people who care, people who don't want to hurt anybody, people who finally get something that matters to them and think, okay, I don't want to mess this up. And because they don't want to mess it up, they slowly stop doing the things that made that connection real in the first place. Now, guys, I have to say to you that I do make mistakes on this for those of you listening for the first time, but at the same time, I'm proud of those mistakes in essence because I'm being myself. I'm not cutting everything just to make it sound like I'm saying a perfect conversation and you have to sit there and wonder, is this AI or is this a real person? There's no question. Okay, well, until they, I guess, increase the ability of the AI, right? But here we go. Before you get what I want, before you get what you want, your mind is usually moving towards something. Psychology has different words for this, but I'm going to say it normally or like the average person would say it. There's a difference between moving towards something you want and moving away from something you fear. Those can look similar on the outside because both of them involve effort, but internally, they're completely different. When you're moving towards something, you're thinking, what can I create here? What can I try? What can I say? What's possible? How do I get closer? How do I express myself? What happens if I take this shot? And you're thinking, what happens if I don't take this shot? You're focused on the target. You might be nervous, but the nervousness has energy all up inside of it. It's like, okay, let's see what happens. You know there's a chance you might look foolish, you might miss, but the possibility, the possible reward seems worth the risk. And sometimes, because you're not completely convinced you can get it, you surprise yourself. You do something better than you thought you could, that everybody thought you could. You say something funnier than you expected, and people laugh out loud a lot better or a lot longer than you thought. You perform above your usual level. You take a chance, and it actually works. And now you've learned something about yourself. There was more in you than you even realized. You see, you take a chance and it actually works. And now you've learned something about yourself. There was more in you than you realized. The part that part matters for real. Because sometimes people look back at who they were in the beginning and say, well, maybe I was fake. Maybe I was pretending. Maybe I had imposter syndrome, or maybe I'm having it now while I'm thinking about what happened. Maybe I was pretending. Maybe that confident, creative, playful person wasn't really me. Maybe I was performing. But I don't think that's always true. Sometimes that was the real you, operating before fear started cutting off your options, cutting off your natural ability. The humor was real. People laughed. It was your joke. The imagination was real. It came out of your mind. The ability to take a chance was real because you took it. You weren't necessarily lying. You get it? But you got to stay. You gotta just listen to what I'm saying here. You were free enough to access a part of yourself that doesn't come out when you're monitoring every move that you're making. You're like watching them, watching you, watching them, watching you. And when you get caught up in that kind of behavior, usually you can't perform. If you're sitting there having too many minds, like in the movie Last Samurai, if you know that movie at all, that's different from pretending to be somebody you're not. You see, but there's also another version of you that can show up in the beginning. Sometimes you're not only free, sometimes you're amplified. There's excitement, there's attraction, there's adrenaline, there's competition, there's novelty. There's the feeling that something important might happen. You give more than your normal amount. You're more available. You think about the person more. You dress more carefully. You put more effort into the conversation. Your mind is active and focused, so the jokes come easier. You stay up later, you drive farther, you take on things you normally might not take on. You become more generous with time, energy, attention, and sometimes money. Now, that doesn't automatically make you dishonest, right? An athlete can play out of their mind for one game. I don't know if many of you know who Daryl Sittler is, and I think he scored 11 points in one game or something like that. I think he still has the record. I can't remember if it was 10 or 11. Anyway, and the performance still happened. They made the shot, they ran the distance, they did what they did. The question is whether that one performance represents their normal sustainable level or not. And that's a different question. Some people know Bam Adebayo, who scored 81 points in a basketball game, but his team was feeding him the ball, but he still had to do a lot to get those points. He still had to put the ball in the basket, right? Sometimes the beginning of a relationship shows your genuine potential. Sorry, my voice is a little off. Let me just drink some tea here for a sec. But it doesn't show what you can maintain every day without burning yourself out. And that's where people get into trouble. They show somebody their highest output version. Then the other person assumes that's the basic package. They think this person is always available, always confident, always entertaining, always intimately ready, always able to spend money, always willing to solve problems, always willing to drive, always willing to listen for 4 hours, always able to carry the emotional weight. But maybe that wasn't your everyday baseline. You getting what I'm saying? Maybe that was your playoff performance. Maybe that was just your best performance. And you can play that way in a playoff when it matters, when the chips are down. The problem is trying to play an entire season at playoff intensity. That's a whole other thing. That's a Russell Westbrook, a Kobe Bryant type of thing. You see, eventually you're going to be spent. So part of staying congruent is understanding the difference between what you're capable of doing sometimes and what you can honestly promise as your normal way of living. Then there's the version of you that gets presented. And this is where it gets a little bit more uncomfortable. Everybody presents themselves at some level. I don't think there's anybody or anything, automatically wrong with that. You're probably going to wear better clothes on the first date than you wear while you're taking out the garbage. You're probably going to put more thought into what you say. You're not going to sit down and immediately hand somebody a full report of every debt, insecurity, medical problem, sexual concern, family argument, and bad decision you ever made since you were 12. That isn't dishonest. That's pacing. You're allowed to have privacy. The problem starts when the connection depends on the other person not discovering something important about the real condition of your life. Maybe you present yourself as more financially comfortable than you are. Maybe you seem more confident than you feel. Maybe you appear more intimately certain than you are. Maybe you act as if you don't need much. Maybe you create the impression that everything you give costs you almost nothing. Maybe you look like the person who can handle everything. And the other person may also attach an image to you that you don't or you didn't entirely actually create. You see, people make assumptions based on race, culture, gender, body, age, clothing, occupation, and how you carry yourself. A person sees a particular type of man and assumes he must be intimately confident, physically strong, financially capable, emotionally controlled, and able to take charge. A person sees a particular type of woman and assumes she must be nurturing, agreeable, intimately open, domestic, emotionally intuitive, and willing to take care of everybody else. Now, the person may never have actually promised that, though, but the image is already in the room. We already saw it. And sometimes, because the image is getting a positive reaction, we cooperate with it. We don't correct anything. We lean into the parts that people seem to like. We say, okay, that's how you see me? Fine, I can be that. And sometimes that might kind of be true. Some of it may be true, but some of it may be an outfit. Not necessarily a total lie, right? But just something we can put on for a while. The problem is, eventually, you want to take off the outfit. Eventually, you want to relax in your track pants and your pair of favorite socks that have a hole in the toe. Eventually, you just want to chill. Eventually, the person meets the part of you that grew up differently than they imagined. The softer part, the uncertain part, the part that wasn't taught how to fight, the part that gets nervous, the part that needs reassurance, the part that can't afford everything, the part that isn't always in control. And now you have fear. What if the person chose the image? What happens when they meet the rest of me? That's when getting what you want can become frightening. You see, before you get it, right, you're mostly dealing with possibility. After you get it, you're dealing with exposure. Now the person is close enough to notice. Now they can see your habits. Now they can see your body when you're not standing perfectly straight or dressed in a way that covers everything. Now they can see how you respond when you're tired. Now they can see what you don't know. Now they can see that some of the confidence was situational. Now they can see the bill. Now they can see the fear. And suddenly your attention changes. Why? You got to cover up, right? Before you were thinking, how do I create something? Now you're thinking, how do I make sure they don't find out what I can't sustain? That's a very different way of living. And this is where self-monitoring starts. You're no longer just having the conversation. You're listening to yourself have the conversation, and that is very distracting. You're looking at their face. Did that joke land? Did they just frown? Did they sigh? Did they just roll their eyes? Did I say too much? Am I talking too much, too long? Do they look disappointed? Do they think I'm weak? Do they think I'm less intelligent? Did they lose attraction? You see, you're doing the thing and grading the thing at the same time. Now, depending on whether or not you have a whole lot of processing power, that just doesn't work for the average person. And when a part of your brain is constantly grading you, there's less of your brain available to be creative, to respond, and to be present. Now, I can't say because I don't have a IQ of over 150, pretty sure. But if you don't have that high IQ, you probably can't grade yourself at the same time. And I think even if your your IQ is high, you still got to do something about grading yourself while you're performing or while you're talking or while you're doing whatever it is you're doing. You see, so the person who seemed spontaneous, right, in the beginning starts looking less spontaneous. Not necessarily because the spontaneity was fake. The spontaneity is being interrupted by surveillance. You're watching yourself too closely to move naturally. This is what I mean by entering the box and then becoming afraid to move inside it. You see, you wanted to get in. You saw the relationship, opportunity, or social position as somewhere you did or somewhere you needed to reach. Sorry, I got to drink some tea again. So you thought outside the box, right? You found another way in. You created a chance. You did something different. Then you got in there, and all of a sudden you became afraid to touch the walls. You think, I better stay in the pocket. I better not come out of the pocket. I better not say something out of turn or say something out of pocket. I better not show too much. I better not show anything that I didn't show before. I better not ask for something that makes them reconsider me. I better not challenge what they're doing. You stop making new pockets. You stop expanding. You think the goal was to enter the box. So once you're inside it, the rest of your energy goes into not being taken out. But maybe entering the box was never supposed to be the final victory or the final destination. Maybe you were supposed to keep growing once you got in there. Maybe the relationship was supposed to become a place where more of you could exist, not less. Maybe getting the position was supposed to help you develop your abilities, not hide the areas where you still needed development. Maybe being chosen was supposed to give you enough safety to relax into your actual self. But if the situation makes you increasingly edited, then you have to ask whether you've actually arrived anywhere worth actually staying. Now, sometimes people hear this, right, and think the problem is complacency. They'll say, well, people get comfortable. They stop trying. They let themselves go. And yes, that can happen, and it does. Sometimes somebody works hard to get a relationship and then decides the work is done. People hate that, actually. I'm talking about the other people. They stop being attentive. They stop being affectionate. They stop showing interest. They stop taking care of themselves. They don't shave anymore. They won't put on a nice dress. They act like getting chosen means they can shut the whole operation down. That's real. But I don't think all relaxation is laziness. You see, sometimes you're tired. You put out an amount of energy that you weren't built to keep producing forever. You reached what you thought was the destination, so naturally you wanted to exhale, exhale, exhale. That sounds funny. Same thing. There's nothing wrong with wanting to exhale. You shouldn't have to remain the permanent or impermanent audition mode. If a relationship requires you to constantly perform at maximum intensity so the person continues choosing you, that isn't security. That's employment with no permanent contract. The deeper question is whether you relaxed into honesty or collapsed into neglect. And those aren't the same thing. You see, relaxing into honesty sounds like this is my normal level. This is what I can sustain. This is how I live when I'm not trying to impress anybody. There are limits. These are my limits. These are my needs. This is what I'm still working on. Collapsing into neglect sounds like I got what I wanted, so now I don't have to care about what the other person needs. One is becoming real, the other is becoming irresponsible. A healthy relationship has to make room for the real person without either person using authenticity as an excuse to stop contributing or stop contributing. The tender-hearted person usually has a different problem, though. The tender-hearted person often doesn't stop contributing. They contribute more. That's why this pattern can be hard to see. Playing not to lose doesn't always look like lying on the couch doing nothing. Sometimes it looks like exhausting yourself. You help more. You listen more. You explain more. You accommodate more. You hide your frustration. You become easier to deal with. You edit yourself. You become useful. You try to make yourself too valuable to throw away. And because you're working so hard, you think you're still moving forward, but the direction of the effort has changed. At first, you were creating a mutual connection. Now you're trying to prevent rejection. At first, your generosity was an expression of how you feel. Now it's a part of your strategy. At first, you were helping because you wanted to. Now you're helping because you're afraid of what will happen if you stop. That's a major distinction. You can be extremely active, while psychologically frozen. You can be doing everything while avoiding the one honest move that might reveal where you actually stand and what you're actually able to do regularly. You'll give money before you ask what the relationship is. You'll solve 10 problems before you say, this arrangement isn't really working for me. You'll spend hours understanding why they're withdrawing before asking whether their withdrawal has made them unsuitable. You'll become indispensable because you're afraid that being yourself actually isn't enough. And that's a very painful way to live, uncomfortable, because usefulness can keep you around without ever making you feel loved. This is where hidden costs become a form of dishonesty. I don't mean dishonesty in the sense that your heart is is evil or you're trying to scam somebody. I mean dishonesty in the sense that your heart is wait, sorry. I don't mean dishonesty in the sense that your heart is evil or you're trying to scam somebody, as I said. I mean the other person is making decisions without accurate information. You're not giving them the proper data. Let's say you give somebody money, right? You make it look like this is something you can afford. It's not a big deal. You don't say you had to borrow it. You don't say you put it on your credit card. You don't say this is taking money away from something that you actually need. Because you're a giving person, you're trying to give from your heart. Yeah, I get it. You just give it, right? Now, maybe your heart is generous. Maybe you really do want to help. Maybe they truly need it. So you're here trying to give out of your own need. But you haven't allowed them to understand what that gesture actually costs. So they have no clue. So they may accept it, believing this isn't a major sacrifice for them. He has it, she has it, she can manage it. This is what they naturally do. Then you feel unappreciated because they don't understand the size of the sacrifice. So their appreciation probably isn't as large. Even if they can't give back to you in the same way, their appreciation didn't exactly, you didn't get it. You didn't give it to me. But how could they understand it if you hid it? That's the contradiction. You wanted them to appreciate the heart behind the action, but you conceal the information that requires them to understand your heart properly. And now the gift creates an image. The image says, I can do this. I'm comfortable doing this. This is sustainable. Once you create that image, you may feel obligated to try to keep it up. And keeping up appearances is exhausting because there is actually no end point. You don't know when you've done enough. You don't know when the person has been impressed enough. You don't know whether they would stay if you stopped. So, every act of generosity produces another test. What happens the next time? Can you do it again? What happens when you say no? Will they still treat you the same way? You were trying to buy security, but now you've created another reason for you to feel insecure. The same thing can happen with confidence. You see, you walk in like you know exactly what you're doing. Maybe you had to. Maybe nobody would have given you an opportunity if you walked in apologizing for yourself and your insecurities and your shortcomings. There are situations where you have to act a little more confident than you feel. You know that fake it till you make it. And there's some value in it, right? When it means practicing a capacity before it actually becomes natural. But fake it till you make it can become dangerous when it turns into fake it so nobody ever finds out. Those are two completely different things. Fake it till you make it means I'm going to behave with enough courage to develop real courage. I'm going to speak even though I'm nervous. I'm going to practice the skill. I'm going to grow in the role. Fake it so nobody finds out means I'm going to avoid the situation that could expose what I still need to learn. I'm going to let somebody else take over. I'm going to hide my questions. I'm going to pretend I'm prepared. I'm going to protect the reputation instead of building the ability. One moves towards competence, the other guards an image of competence. And once again, it can look similar from the outside. Both people may appear confident, but one is willing to risk looking imperfect so that they can improve. The other is trying to avoid any evidence that the confidence might not actually be there. There's also something that happens when we're shocked that we succeeded. Some people call it imposter syndrome, but I don't want to use a popular label like that to explain everything. It's more specific than saying I don't deserve to be here. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's I didn't know I could get there. I surprised myself. I may have surprised everybody else. And now that I'm here, I don't know whether I can reproduce what I just did. You take the shot, it goes in, huh? Now everybody's looking at you like you're a shooter. Happened to me one time, I remember in college. I was playing a basketball game at George Brown College, and we were playing intramurals. And we were playing against other colleges in Toronto. And it wasn't the actual basketball team of the school, but it was the school's representation of the intramural. So pretty much the best we had at our school. And everybody brought their best. And I went and I was shooting these shots, 3-pointers. And then eventually these guys, all I heard was, shooter! And they started double teaming me. After about 3 or 4 shots in, that was pretty much the end of my game almost. But anyways, so look, now everybody looks at you like you're a shooter, but you don't normally shoot like that. You make the room laugh. Now they expect you to be funny all the time. You attract somebody you thought was out of your league. Now you think you have to maintain whatever version made you or made that happen. You get the job. Now you're afraid they're going to ask you to demonstrate the skill again. The first success creates a new burden. Before, failure it would have just simply meant you tried and it didn't work. After success, failure can feel like exposure. Now it can say, the first time was luck. You're not really this person. You don't belong. That's why success can create more anxiety than failure. Some people, I guess, are probably scared to succeed because of this. Failure confirms what you already feared. Success creates something you now have to defend. And some people are much better at fighting to get into a place than living comfortable once they've actually arrived there. But I also think we have to talk about what the other person might be doing. Because sometimes both people are presenting. One person comes in with confidence, style, humor, generosity, or emotional availability. The other person comes in with attraction, openness, affection, sexuality, and admiration. Both people may be giving more than they can sustain. Both people are excited. Both people are trying to create a particular impression. So the relationship begins between two amplified versions of each person. Then real life starts arriving. The man may not be as confident every day. The woman may not be as affectionate every day. One person may not have as much money as they seem to have. The other person may not have as much emotional availability as they showed. And now both people feel as though something changed. Sometimes they accuse each other of the bait and switch when neither person fully understands their own baseline. They weren't necessarily running a calculated scam. They're putting their best foot forward, right? They were operating on excitement and infatuation. But once the excitement settles, right, they discovered that the relationship had been built at a level neither could actually maintain. That's why honesty has to enter early, not complete exposure, not telling somebody everything before trust exists, but enough reality that the relationship isn't being constructed around two fictional people. Sorry, guys. I don't know why I have this like frog in my throat today. You see, you have to let the other person see something of your ordinary pace. Something of your normal means something of your actual needs, something of what you can and cannot sustain. Otherwise, the first phase becomes a commercial. And eventually, the person receives the product and realizes the commercial didn't explain the maintenance cost. They find out that your Big Mac, the patty on the Big Mac, really doesn't look like that in real life. You know what I mean? We've all seen it. You look at the patty in the commercial, the burger looks like it's about 6 inches thick. Then you get this burger and it's about 3.5 inches thick or less. So, what does it actually mean to leave it all on the floor? Because the phrase can sound like you should destroy yourself, give everything, spend everything, fight until your body gives out, stay until you've been emotionally carried away on a stretcher. That's not what I mean. Leave it on the floor doesn't mean maximum output. It means honest output. It means congruence. Congruence is a university word, but the ideal is simple. The person you say you are, the person you believe you are, and the person your behavior demonstrates shouldn't be three completely different people. It should be the same person. If you say something matters, right? If you say something matters, your choice should show that it matters. If you say you need something, you shouldn't pretend you don't need it just because you're afraid the person might leave. If you say you can afford something, you should be able to actually afford it. Or explain honestly that you're choosing to sacrifice. If you say you don't accept something, you can't keep accepting it forever and still expect the other person to believe your words. If you say you're trying to build a relationship, you have to let the person know what kind of relationship you're trying to build. Leaving it on the floor means you don't finish the situation wondering what would have happened if you had actually told the truth. You said what you wanted. You said what you could give. You said what you couldn't keep doing. You acted according to what you said. And then you allowed the results to be what they are or what they were. And that's the hard part. You allow the result. Just let it happen. Because honesty requires a willingness to lose. That might be the most important point of this whole conversation of what I'm saying. You can't be fully honest if you're not willing to lose what the truth might cost you. A boundary that you're completely unwilling to enforce isn't much of a boundary at all. It's a preference. And When you have a preference for something, you might not even get a chance to get even close to having that preference because it's just a preference. It's not a boundary. A boundary is a hard, fast, mm, that's what it is. That's what it has to be. That's what it's going to be. If it's not going to be that way, I said what it is. I'm out of here. Do you have the guts? A need that you'll never risk the relationship over can be ignored indefinitely. You can say, I need affection. I need communication. I need respect. I need this relationship to be defined. I need the financial expectations to actually be realistic. I need us to address this problem. But if the person knows you'll remain no matter what they do, then your words don't carry the same information. You're saying something matters while your behavior says it doesn't matter enough to change anything. And again, I'm not saying you threaten people, do this or else. No. I'm not saying every conversation should sound like, do this or I'm out of here. It's not honesty either. That can be manipulation. And it happens all the time to people. I'm saying that somewhere inside of yourself, you have to accept that other person or other people may reject the real version that you're offering, and that's the real version of you. That's you. They may say, I can't give that. I don't want that kind of relationship. I don't want to define anything. I don't like that part of you. I'm not willing to change this. And then you, yes, you have information. Painful information, maybe, but actual, real, honest information. Without the willingness to lose, you'll keep modifying the offer until the other person can accept it. And then you'll wonder why you don't feel chosen. You don't feel chosen because you didn't show them the full decision. You made sure the offer was almost impossible to refuse. You took out of the needs. You took out of the limits. You took out the difficult parts. You added extra benefits. And they said yes. But what did they say yes to? That's the problem. There are two different ways to lose. You see, there's outcome loss and there's identity loss. You see, outcome loss is simple. You didn't get the person. You didn't get the job. You lost the game. You didn't get selected. The relationship ended. That can hurt. I'm not pretending it doesn't. But sometimes you lose the outcome and still respect yourself, and you're able to move on and forget sometimes what even happened. You can say, I spoke, I tried, I stayed honest, I didn't hide what I needed, I didn't buy my way into a situation, I didn't cower, I didn't become cruel, I didn't abandon my beliefs. I gave a real effort, and it didn't work. Those losses often become easier to release because the event was complete. You did what you could do. The answer came. You move forward. Identity loss is different. Identity loss is when you may keep the person or position for a while, but you start disappearing in it. You don't say what you think. You pretend things don't bother you. You conceal the cost of your generosity. You stop using your humor. You stop trusting your judgment. You make yourself smaller. You become more useful and less known. You become more acceptable and less recognizable. That loss can haunt you more and more as you remember it each time. More than an ordinary rejection, because part of you knows that you participated in your own disappearance. You remember the moment you should have spoken. You remember when you should have asked a question. You remember when you knew something wasn't right and chose to preserve access instead of finding out the truth. That's why some losses stay with us. Not because we lost, because we know we didn't fully show up the way we should have. Going out on your shield doesn't mean staying until you're destroyed. People can misunderstand that too. They think standing on principle or standing on business means remaining in the fight forever. No. Sometimes standing on principle means leaving. The shield isn't the relationship. The shield is what you believe. You say, this is what I need. This is what I can offer. This is what I believe a relationship should be. This is what I will work through. This is what I will forgive. This is what I cannot keep participating in. Then you behave in a way that matches those statements. If the person comes forward, you have something to work with. If they don't, you stop dragging both people along. That isn't quitting because something became difficult. That's recognizing that mutuality cannot be performed by one person. And for the tender-hearted person, that is hard. Because you can always think of one more thing you could do. That's your heart. You have a good heart. One more explanation, one more gift, one more chance, one more adjustment, one more way to understand their childhood, one more way to reduce their stress, one more way to be easier to love. But sometimes the last honest act is accepting that you can't do the other person's part. You can't leave everything you have on the floor and still lose. Well, let's say no. You can leave everything you have on the floor and still lose because the other person wasn't playing the same game, actually. It doesn't mean you failed, though. It may mean you finally stopped giving for two people. Now, how do you stay congruent without blurting out your whole life immediately? Because somebody will hear this and say, okay, I'm supposed to tell someone every insecure thought on the first day. No. Honesty and immediate disclosure aren't the same thing. You don't have to reveal everything before trust has been earned. You don't have to avoid creating expectations that depend on concealment. There's a difference between saying, I'm not ready to discuss that yet, and pretending that the issue doesn't exist. There's a difference between saying, I like giving, but I have a budget, and giving beyond your means while acting as though it's nothing. There's a difference between saying, I'm confident in some situations, but I deal with performance anxiety sometimes, and building a whole identity around never appearing nervous. There's a difference between taking your time intimately and pretending you have no concerns because you think the other person might judge you. There's a difference between wearing good clothes and using clothing to suggest a lifestyle that you actually can't sustain. Staying congruent doesn't mean putting your worst foot forward. It means your best foot is still attached to your real body. One of the best questions you can ask is, what am I hiding the cost of? Am I hiding what the gift costs? Am I hiding what this level of availability costs? Am I hiding what this intimate performance cost me mentally? Am I hiding what it costs to keep acting bothered or unbothered? Am I hiding how much preparation it requires to appear naturally capable? Am I hiding how much resentment is building underneath my accommodation? Am I hiding how much fear is behind my confidence? Because hidden costs always collect somewhere. It may collect as a debt, it may collect as exhaustion, it may collect as anxiety, it may collect as resentment, it may collect as bitterness, it may collect as physical pain, it may collect as a feeling that nobody appreciates you. But sometimes nobody appreciates the cost because nobody actually knows what the cost is or was. And if you can't tell the person the cost, you need to ask, why? Are you protecting them? Or are you protecting the image they have of you? Another question is, what did I stop doing once I got what I wanted? Did I stop taking care of my body? Did I stop developing my career? Did I stop seeing people? Did I stop speaking honestly? Did I stop being funny? Did I stop asking direct questions? Did I stop creating opportunities outside of this relationship? Did I stop expanding? Sometimes we treat the relationship as though it is the final prize, and everything else that helped us become attractive starts disappearing. You were attractive, or you were active being attractive. You were engaged. You were taking chances. You had goals. You had momentum. Then somebody chose you, and all the momentum got redirected into maintaining the relationship. Your whole life started orbiting around the person. Now you're no longer the person they met. You understand? Not because you were pretending in the beginning, because you stopped feeding the parts of your life that produced that version of you. That's another way fear shrinks people. It convinces you that the safest thing is to put all of your attention on what you're afraid of losing. But when you stop maintaining the rest of yourself, you often become more dependent on the very things that you're actually afraid to lose. Now, if the relationship goes, everything goes. Your companionship, companionship, it's a new word. Your hope, your intimacy, your social life, your confidence, your reason to dress up, your reason to leave the house. That makes you even more afraid. And then you accommodate even more. So staying congruent also means keeping your own life alive after somebody enters it. They should join your life. They shouldn't become the only reason your life exists. Here's another thing people don't like admitting. Sometimes the room you wanted to enter wasn't your room yet. It means you may have needed the development before you could live there comfortably. Maybe you wanted a particular kind of relationship. Maybe you wanted a certain lifestyle. Maybe you wanted a certain job. Maybe you wanted to be accepted by a certain social group. And instead of preparing yourself, you found a way to get in through presentation, overextension, overgiving, or temporary performance. Then once you arrived, the environment started exposing the parts of you that you hadn't actually developed yet. It doesn't mean you're worthless. It means access arrived before preparation. And sometimes we blame the room. Sometimes the room was cruel. Sometimes the person was shallow, yeah. Sometimes the standards were unfair. All of that can be true. But the useful question is, what did I need to build in myself so I could enter without pretending? Maybe it was physical health. Maybe it was financial stability. Maybe it was emotional confidence. Maybe it was communication. Maybe it was learning to set boundaries. Maybe it was learning to fight for your position without becoming violent, cruel, or domineering. Maybe it was understanding that being loved, or being loving, I should say, doesn't mean being passive. You can acknowledge what other people failed to teach you without deciding that your development is permanently their responsibility. At some point, you have to train the part that wasn't trained. Not because you shouldn't have had these things or this help or should have to do everything alone. Because you're the one living with the consequences now. You're a big boy, you're a big girl. And maybe that's the hopeful part of all of this. The early version of you may not have been a fraud. Maybe it was evidence that you can be funny, evidence that you can take a chance, evidence that you can be creative, evidence that you can be attractive, evidence that you can perform, evidence that you can create opportunity, evidence that you can surprise yourself and others. The mistake was thinking that one great performance meant no further development was required. Potential showed up. Then fear took over before potential became your actual character. So maybe the job now isn't to return to some artificial beginning. Maybe it's to train the free version of yourself until that freedom becomes more sustainable. Not confidence every second, not being funny every second, not acting like you never need help, but becoming someone who can make a mistake without disappearing, somebody who can reveal a limitation without believing their membership is going to be revoked, somebody who can say what they need and accept the answer, somebody who can give without hiding the cost, somebody who can be tender-hearted without becoming easy to exploit, somebody who doesn't have to choose between being loving and having a spine. That's a much better goal than trying to perform the opening act forever. Who can? Einstein wasn't always right. Jordan didn't hit every shot. So maybe the answer isn't play to win. That still sounds like everything is a contest. Relationships aren't supposed to be one person defeating another person. The real answer is stay congruent while the stakes rise. Stay recognizable to yourself after somebody chooses you. Keep telling the truth as the relationship becomes more important. Keep enough of your own life that you are capable of walking away from what isn't mutual. Don't create a lead through promises you can't sustain. Don't protect an image that is costing you your peace. Don't confuse being selected with being safe. And don't assume that losing the person is the worst possible outcome. Sometimes the worst possible outcome is keeping the person while becoming a stranger to yourself. So let me close with this. A lot of us think our biggest fear is rejection. Maybe it isn't. Maybe the deeper fear is that if somebody sees the whole picture, the ordinary body, the real finances, the anxiety, the needs, the limitations, the softer personality, the parts that don't match the image, they'll change their mind. So we show them enough truth to create a connection, but not enough truth to let us feel secure inside of it. Then we spend the relationship maintaining the distance between the person they chose and the person we're afraid to actually show so they won't discover us for real. And that is exhausting because no compliment fully reaches you. No acceptance completely settles you. No amount of affection proves enough. Some part of you is always thinking, yes, but would they still choose me if they knew? That's why congruency matters. Not because honesty guarantees that people will stay and like you or accept you. It doesn't. Sometimes honesty is the reason they leave. Sometimes you state what you need and they say they can't give it. Sometimes you admit what you can afford and the lifestyle they want doesn't match. Sometimes you show the tender part and they prefer the image. Sometimes you stop overgiving and the relationship suddenly has nothing holding itself together. That hurts, but at least you have your answer for real. At least the person had an opportunity to choose something real. At least you didn't spend another 5 years proving that a version of you that never existed deserved to stay in the room. Maybe the goal isn't to make sure nobody ever leaves you. Maybe the goal is to make sure you don't leave yourself trying to keep them. Maybe leaving it all on the floor isn't about exhausting every resource. Maybe it's saying what was true while you were still there. Maybe it's saying, this is me, and I'm comfortable with that. It's letting your kindness be honest, letting your generosity be informed, letting your confidence include the possibility that there might be some imperfection, letting your needs exist without apologizing for the fact that you actually have them, and being willing to accept that the real you may not fit every room. You might be a square peg in a round hole at some points. Because you can lose a person and still keep your identity. You can lose an opportunity and still respect how you showed up. You can lose the outcome and still know that the person who took the shot was really you. But if you get what you want and spend the rest of the time hiding, shrinking, accommodating, and protecting an appearance, then maybe you lost before the person actually left. And maybe the bravest thing isn't holding on to everything you worked hard to get. Maybe it's becoming honest enough to find out whether the thing you got can hold the person you actually are. You're probably right.